Welcome back to another episode of Rob and Avis Ramble. Avis, we got yet another guest with us here today, and that guest is Private Eye Russ.
I'm excited.
Yeah, you're excited. It was when I mentioned Avis that you were coming on. She was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like she just sounds like the whole Private Eye thing to her was like, "I would love to do that," and I'm like, "You don't even know what's involved in doing that."
I'm nosy, though.
But you are nosy, yeah. So I want to let me. This is kind of maybe like a lead in, Russ, is to ask you. Like, I don't really. So I know of you from X. So we have an account on X. You have an account on X. We follow you on X, and I was trying to think about how do I want to describe Russ when we kind of do the intro part here, and I was, is it fair to describe you as someone who's out there kind of scaring the shit out of men? Or is it more that you're educating them to the potential risk around interacting with women, which I probably think is probably more the case, but how would you describe it? What do you do?
Well, I would say it's the latter of those two. So what I do, and some people, I've been called a whole bunch of names, but at the end of the day, the way I try to frame things is this: a lot of guys go into relationships and marriage, and they don't have the same worldview or relationship view that most women have, and not necessarily because not necessarily through any malfeasance on the women's part, but men have been very poorly educated about how to deal with women successfully over a long period of time. And so it's not about scaring people. It's about putting people in the frame of mind where they can make an informed decision, which I always say, which is all any of us should ever ask for. Just be able to make an informed decision and go into things with your eyes wide open. And so that's what I try to do. Some people don't like that. I've gotten suspended on X, and there's all types of stuff on X.
Oh, I didn't realize you had been suspended before.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there like, why? Like they actually showed me the post both times I was suspended. I was like, there was no cursing, there was no profanity. I wasn't doing anything hateful to anybody. And there's all types of stuff on X that but those are okay, I guess. but I think some of it is people will sometimes complain about things, and I think maybe that has more to do with it than the algorithm itself. But hey, I'm still here, so
that's good. And when you got suspended, I mean, that was when it was actually X after Elon took over, or was this in Twitter days?
No, this was after Elon took over.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, both times. Both times it was after Elon took over.
Yeah. Not so much the haven of free speech is supposed to be, huh? I guess.
Well, you would think him in his position, he would actually be more understanding.
This is true.
But I guess not. And so he's the boss. He's a boss. I'm on there, so they can suspend me when they choose to.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of doubting it. Probably wasn't Elon personally that did it.
No.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let me just kind of ask you just to help us understand and maybe the people who are listening to this. So, you're a private investigator. Obviously, this is what you do. Like, what does that really mean? Like, what are you doing so someone comes to you and they say, "Hey, Russ, my wife or my husband, depending on who's coming to you, I'm suspicious that they're stepping out on our marriage or something's going on." That, like, what does that result in? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis with that once that has happened?
First of all, thank you both so much for having me on. I should have said that at the beginning, but thank you so much. You guys are very gracious to invite me, so thank you both.
Well, we feel the same. We appreciate you coming on. Yeah, equally as gracious.
And afterwards, we'll go have some coffee, I guess.
Perfect.
And so, besides the infidelity stuff, I do a lot of different things. Most private investigators, probably 95%, only do surveillance. Some of that is cheating surveillance. Some of that is what they call workman's compensation investigation. So if you say you're injured and you're getting workman's compensation payment, and then all of a sudden they see you at the Highland Games throwing telephone poles or whatever, then they'll do things like that. That's actually happened. The big strong guy is supposed to be injured. He's the caber toss.
Yeah,
it's literally a telephone pole, and you're supposed to flip it end over end. And this guy is actually competing in the caber toss. And it's unbelievable. The guy was unbelievably strong, but obviously he wasn't injured. So, but the cases I do are I do some infidelity, but the majority of my cases are homicides, as well as corporate theft investigations. I also do some criminal defense investigations as well too. And
Okay.
so I tell stories about some of the infidelity stuff because number one, nobody wants to hear about corporate theft investigations, even though they get really, really intricate and very involved. But nobody wants to hear about that because it's not
Uh,
sexy.
This is true. Yeah.
And the criminal defense stuff. Most of them are not very sexy, but the infidelity stuff, people take notice of them. And I try to teach lessons. I try to give lessons or takeaways at the end of all those different case files I'll talk about. Now, when I do the case files, just so you know, I always change the story significantly. I don't give anybody's name out. I don't give any times and dates, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm not trying to hurt anybody or harm
Sure.
anybody. But also two, their privacy, even without the harm, I don't want to invade anybody's privacy. So I change the story so that it can't be identified or be targeted at one individual. There are some stories I can't tell just because they're too specific, and there's no way to keep people, anonymous and to keep
Yeah.
their identities out of it. But
Makes
so
sense.
if a guy comes to me and says, "Hey," or gal comes to me because this happened as well too, um, and says, "Hey, I think my spouse is stepping out on me." The first thing I'll do is I'll actually sit down and talk with them, whether it's digitally, by Zoom or whatever it might be, or in person if they're here locally. And what I want to do is I want to get a feel of the individual, and I'll ask them questions like, "Okay, why do you think your spouse is, your significant other is cheating on you?" And I do that just because sometimes when I'm talking to people, they'll talk their they'll talk themselves out of launching an investigations because sometimes their suppositions are a little bit off, and so I'll give people that way out to test and see if this is actually what they want to do, if they're actually committed to doing. Some people will say, "You know what, now that I talked to you, maybe I shouldn't go down this road," and I'll say, "You know what, fair enough." But in other cases they'll say, "No, I want to continue forward," and so I have to gauge their personality for a couple of different things. Number one, well, the main thing I need to gauge their personality on is to make sure that if there is information that does indicate that their spouse is cheating on them, that they're not going to, um, you know, go over the edge. You know what I mean? Because there are some times where private investigators have been linked to horrible things happening to people. They've used private investigators to find information. Like you look at the cheaters stuff from before, when people are being confronted with the spouse that they're cheating on with the other. I would never do something like that. That's
Mhm.
way too volatile of a situation. It's incredibly irresponsible. It's unethical. Obviously they were doing it for a TV show, but it's incredibly unethical, and that's not real life. In real life, people get hurt, and so my goal is if I do find information that someone is actually being unfaithful, what I'll do is I'll actually talk to them, and I'll say, okay, and I'll find out, okay, where are you? What are you doing? Let's have a chat. And so sometimes those chats are good. Sometimes those chats are, during the time we investigated, we didn't find anything. Or during the time we investigated, we did find something, and here's what it is. And I try to avoid showing people direct evidence like video evidence or photographic
Mhm.
evidence that shows really graphic things, which sometimes that does get captured. Just because you're dealing with somebody during probably one of the worst days of their life, and so the last thing I want to do is add fuel to the fire. So what I'll do is actually counsel guys or gals. Look, here's what I think you should do. Well, what are you going to do next? And I'll ask them, what are you going to do next? And I'll counsel men, I'll counsel women. I'll say, hey, look, here's how you should handle this. Always be cool. Always stay calm. Don't think with the emotional part of your brain. Think rationally. Just because I don't want them to be in a state of mind where they're, spiraling and spiraling, and things are just getting worse and worse. And then, who knows what's going to happen. That was a little bit of a long-winded answer, so
No,
hopefully I
but a
answered
good
that for you.
one and a thorough one. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, and I'm not asking you to divulge any, trade secrets. And if you can't answer this question, that's fine. But I am just curious, kind of listening to you when you talk about like you're capturing sometimes graphic, I'm in my mind, I'm like, you've got video of people having sex or something,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
how does that actually happen as a private investigator? Like, how are you gathering that sort of evidence?
There's a lot of ways. Yeah, see, here's the thing, and this is one of the things I love about what I do. You know, I spent a lot of time in the military. Then I was a cop for a while. Before I was a cop, I decided I need to get out of the bodyguard thing. I was doing bodyguard work, and then when I'm divorced now, but my wife at the time was pregnant. I'm working. I was head of security for an extremely large church.
Mm.
Man, the stories I could tell you about that job was. I mean, I think most of the white hairs I have came from that particular
From
job.
that.
My gosh, it just got. But these are people that probably need to be there, right? And so I actually got out of that business altogether, and I actually took my Series 7, passed the Series 7. I actually started working for a stockbrokerage firm.
Wow.
Believe it or not. But and then I wound up getting back into just because I was actually good at it, but I hated it.
Mm.
And so just because it just I have a very active imagination, a very active mind. And so I'm actually very creative. I'm actually in the middle of writing 2 books.
Oh, wow.
I have different stories I've written. A couple of them are really long. They're going to be fiction. I'm writing one trade book about litigation support investigations, another one directly for men and how to deal with women more productively, and then another one that's fiction. And so for
Yeah.
me, my brain is I'm always thinking, and I'm always thinking about how to get things done. And so I have an intern, a brand new intern, believe it or not, and she asked me, what's my greatest asset? And I said, creativity. And
Mhm.
so you have to understand and learn how to think way, way outside, because when you're dealing with human beings, there is no one solution to any particular problem. And so every case is a problem that needs to be solved. And I love solving problems, and I love solving puzzles. And so we've captured video. Some of them was really easy to capture. We've had cases where either a husband or a wife or a significant other were literally in a parking lot somewhere, engaged in different types of activities.
Wow.
What I like the sterile version of, I like to say, fun bedroom activity.
Yeah.
In a
That way,
vehicle? Out of a vehicle?
both, both.
Wow.
Yeah, both. Yeah, and like some of them were, you just like, holy smokes, man. And there are people nearby and watching, and I'm like, okay, this is easy. Uh, you know, then we've had some where people were offshore on boats, and we still managed to capture video.
Mm.
And so, there's so many different ways, but you have to be
Is
flexible.
this a situation where you have friends in the government with the satellites that can look down, or?
No, no. Well, no. I actually do have some government friends from back in my military days, but no, nothing like. I wish I had that kind of hookup. I'd be a billionaire right now if I did. No, it's when people are cheating. Here's what happens: people almost never get caught the first time they cheat. They usually when the alarm bell goes off in their significant other's head is usually because they got a little bit sloppy. They're very careful in the beginning. They start getting sloppy because they've been getting away for it,
Mhm.
getting away with it for an extended period of time. Excuse me. And so that's when that's usually when we get called in. And I have a team of guys. Like the surveillance stuff, I rarely do surveillance nowadays, just because I hate it. I'm good at it, but I absolutely hate it. And I've got guys that if they wanted to count the hairs on your backside, they would find a way to hide a camera in your toilet. They're so
Wow.
good. Yeah, some of them just they just really, really sneaky, really, really good at what they do. And I handle a lot of the person to person stuff, a lot of the actual investigative stuff, as far as dealing with people, interviews, tracking down witnesses. So many different things. Besides the PI stuff, I'm also a licensed bail bondsman, and so
Oh, see, that sounds fun too.
yeah, it gets really interesting. And so bail bondsmen will hire me to track down some of their skips that they can't find. And so what I usually wind up doing is I wind up quarterbacking a bunch of different cases. But the ability to think and analyze a problem and then come up with a solution is one of the greatest attributes you can have as an investigator. I think that's why a lot of guys just do surveillance, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of very good surveillance specialists. I would get, I have a tendency to get bored, and for me, you're watching someone else live their life, and I can't think of, unless you're watching somebody really exciting, I can't. I'd rather do my own thing and live my own life and work and run my business, and my time is better spent directing a lot of that traffic than engaging in that particular thing myself, unless things really get super super. Some of the work I do is dangerous. So like a lot of the homicides I work, they're not from the law enforcement side; they're from the civil side. And so negligent security cases, if someone gets hurt or injured at an apartment complex or a shopping mall or whatever it might be, by Florida statutes and most other states, they can sue if there's a known problem and the property owner or management company hasn't taken steps to mitigate those circumstances for people visiting and just doing a normal course of business. I've done more than 80 homicides here in the state of Florida over the last 17, 18 years. And so a lot of those cases, almost all of them, take you into really bad neighborhoods. I mean, like really bad neighborhoods. And so to give you an example, there's a neighborhood here in Orlando that's still around, shockingly, called Timber Scan Condos, Tymber Scan Condos, SKAN Condos. I've worked 5 homicide cases in this one place. Wow. And two other shootings. And most of the buildings have been condemned. But people will rip off the boards and move in, no water, no running, no electricity. And, at nighttime, they'll be, literally like camp out in the front with a little campfire.
Yeah. It gets hot in Florida too.
Yes, it does. And which I don't understand. And believe it or not, it was probably a really beautiful place. It's literally lakeside property, like right on the lake, but it has, it's, most of the properties are condemned. It's really bad. I remember one time I was training an intern. And I was using an active case to train this particular intern. And we're driving around and we're looking for somebody. It's nighttime. There's no light anywhere. And we're taking nighttime pictures and video with cameras mounted to my car. And the front left tire started going thump, 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 thump. And this guy's like, "Oh, we better stop and check the tire." I said, "Dude, we are not stopping here in the dark." there is no way. I said, I said, "Look, I'll buy a new tire and a rim if I have to." Right. And so we get out, and not even kidding you, guy's name is Jeff. You could ask him about this. What was lodged in my tire was a spent shell casing from someone's shootout that was left over. And so, but I've gone to some of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the state of Florida and other states as well too. But that's where a lot of my cases, excuse me, that's where a lot of the homicide cases will take. With the other cases. Some of the infidelity stuff, I've had to do things where I've had to infiltrate. And that's a bad word considering what I'm going to say. I've had to infiltrate, or no, I've had to penetrate sex clubs on more than one occasion. And obviously, I didn't get involved in anything directly myself. However, I was allowed in and made my way in. And
now, in a situation like that, do you let are there owners of the establishment? I don't know how I want to phrase this, but the people that are running whatever this is, are they aware of who you are?
No. Okay. No.
Do you disguise? Do you go in disguise?
I'm actually pretty good at changing my appearance, but the main thing with some of those things is you have to get endorsed by someone else.
Oh,
okay.
And so you have to get someone to sign off on you and say, "Hey, this person's okay." And the main thing with that was I actually talked to the person, that owned the actual property where this particular thing was going on. And I was like, "Look, I'm here for this individual. That's it. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. No one else will be identified or wind up in a report or anything like that." Because at the end of the day, that wasn't my assignment. My assignment was to find out if 1 + 1 = 2. And that was it. And so there were no, in that particular instance, there were no pictures or videos taken. That I wouldn't imagine anybody would want to see what was going on. Anyway, and the shocking part was when you go to when you do different things like that, and you see people and you're like, "Ooh." And so it's kind of one of those things where I actually made eye contact with a guy I know, and we both kind of looked at each other. He looked at me, I looked at him, and we kind of looked away with that kind of unspoken agreement, like, we'll never speak of this again.
And what was on it? What was it? Was he like, this is Russ as private investigator, or this is Russ because he just wants to be here? I'm not. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's probably what he's thinking. I'm thinking to myself, wonder if your wife knows you're here. Probably not. And so, but with private eye work, thing I love about it is every single case can be completely different, and I absolutely love it. I love different challenges, and sometimes things are similar, but nothing's ever the same. And human beings are capable of just some really just out there situations sometimes, and some of them are funny, some of them are just shocking. And so besides these things, besides the bail bonds, besides the cases, I don't do bodyguard work that much anymore, just because it's so time consuming. It literally shuts down the rest of your business. You can't do anything else while you're doing executive protection. But I have trained executive protection specialists, just because I did that for a lot of years. And one of the things I do that I'm particularly proud of, I volunteer some of my time as an investigator for a couple of different nonprofits to search for missing and exploited children.
Oh yeah.
And so if there's a child missing and they think they're in our area, what they'll do is they'll kind of send out a signal flare to different investigators, and we'll team up and try to track the child down.
Yeah, probably very little work that's more meaningful than that, I imagine.
Yeah. It's incredibly satisfying. It's incredibly satisfying, and we're able to be a lot more effective than law enforcement just because their hands are tied in so many different ways. And a lot of the local law enforcement, they know that, and so they'll let us do what we need. And a lot of times I can call them up and say, hey, look, I have a partial tag. Can you help me with this? And they'll help. And then at the end of it, we have to stay hands off when it comes to children. Unlike the movies and TV shows, we can't kick in the door and hit somebody with a club over the head and then rescue the child. We can't. We have to call them, and they have to take care of it from that particular instance.
Yeah. I imagine that could be pretty emotionally taxing work too. I would imagine.
Initially, it was. I actually got not really depressed, but I was really down initially because I wasn't being successful. And so when you think about it, if a child goes missing and you don't find that child within 42, 48, 72 hours, you may never see that child may never be seen again. And so for me, that was just weighing on me. And I was talking to a buddy of mine. He's a ex special forces guy from Vietnam. I said, look, man, I said, this is bothering me. And he said, okay. He said, here's the thing, kiddo. He said, you're either playing by the rules or you're playing to win. And I was like, okay. And so, that's when I had to go into the ends justify the means mode. And obviously, I don't break any laws. I don't do anything that I'm not supposed to. Do I bend some of the rules? Yeah, a bunch. But I don't go over the line. And then we started getting more and more success. And so, but it's one of those things where like, to get information like that, I've got a pretty good network of people. Like most of my CIs, the best ones are homeless people and sex workers. Because they know everything. They know everybody, and nobody really hides anything from them. Homeless people are part of the real estate. Nobody pays attention to them. Sex workers get to listen to and hear all types of conversations and all types of information. And for the missing and exploited kids, I know a few registered sex offenders that I'll pay them money for information. They're not going to do that out of the goodness of their heart. But, I remember one deputy was actually angry at me because I paid somebody else, paid one of these guys off. And I just explained it to him. I said, look, man, I said, where am I going to get this information from? Google doesn't have it. You guys don't have it. Who's going to have this information? Guys like that. And he said, well, why'd you have to pay him? I said, well, he's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart.
Yeah, he's not a good dude.
Precisely. I said, so I said, here's something that I try to explain to people, especially some of the new guys that come on and want to join some of these hunts. Is at the end of the day, someone calls me up and said, "Hey, Russ, my child, my son, my daughter is missing. Can you please find them? Do they care how I find their child, or do they just want their child back?"
Yeah.
There you
Just
go.
want the child back. Yep.
Yeah, and that's where law enforcement has to put together a case. All I have to do is find the child. And so a lot of times they'll give us a lot of they'll give us a lot of help, but also too they understand that they know that I'm responsible. I was a cop for a while. They know I'm not a guy who's going to go off the rails or do anything that's going to put me in the news. Obviously,
I mean, we hear about Florida man all the time.
Oh my gosh, yeah, Florida man is that reputation is well earned. It's a well earned reputation with Florida man. It's there's just some wild things that go on, but those cases are satisfying when you're able to reunite
I can
a child
imagine.
with their family. Yeah, there's no better feeling. Nothing better than.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. I mean, that is really meaningful work, and like I said, probably it doesn't pay the bills, but probably of the stuff you're doing, like I'm sure
fills the cup.
Fills the cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and for like, but the cases in general, mostly ton of homicides, a lot of corporate theft and embezzlement, and then you're talking about intellectual property theft, and some of those cases even kind of turn into almost spy versus spy, and so you've got to be so crafty, and you're talking about they call it they used to call it industrial espionage. Now they got a cute term for it. It's called competitive intelligence. And so, yeah, exactly. They make everything sound so great. And instead of pimps, they call them human traffickers. I'm the VP of human trafficking. It sounds too legitimate. I think they should go back to pimp to call them what they are actually. But with competitive intelligence, it's about finding out who's stealing either intellectual property. A lot of intellectual property goes on that most corporations have no idea about. Material theft is easier to gauge because you have inventory, then some of the inventory is missing, but uncovering the theft rings, and it's almost always some an insider connection, and so uncovering all of that takes a lot of intricate investigations, and I even have a guy that I use as a subcontractor who's a really good retired government forensic accountant. And so for even embezzlement, and I mean, he lives for numbers, and that's.
I'm thinking of Ben Affleck right now. Is that the right picture?
The accountant.
No, this guy's kind of a bent over guy with glasses, really thick glasses, but he'll sit down in front of a computer, 3 or 4 computer screens for 18 hours at a time. I mean, he's amazing, but he actually loves it, and so most of the guys that work for me, the investigators, everybody else, it's mostly subcontractors.
Okay,
but they're all specialists.
Nice.
Wow. Well, let me shift gears a little bit, kind of back towards the marriage side of things, and just to ask you, like in your experience and the things that you've seen, over the years and these investigations you do, like, what if you were counseling like a younger married couple, I know you're, I don't know if it's fair to say you're anti-marriage, and we'll come back to that and kind of get on that a little bit more. But let's just assume that, there's someone who's married and they come to you and they're Russ, and they're like, hey, based on what you've seen and what like, what do you see as the most common pitfalls that are happening in marriages that are causing these issues that you're having to investigate?
Lack of accountability on both sides. So if you're going to get, I'm not anti-marriage. I'm anti-marriage contract with the state.
Yes, same here.
And so if you want to join with someone, I know there's a lot of pastors or religious groups that require a marriage license. The Bible doesn't have, I don't see anywhere where it said anything about a marriage license, because some of the marriage laws, the governments don't do anything well. So do you want that same government administering your children, your home, your money? Probably not. Especially your children. And so, lack of accountability from the standpoint where, I've talked to guys that I've literally had a guy contact me and say that he wants me to look into his wife because he thinks she might be cheating. He said, but I trust her. I let her do what she wants. Look, trusting someone and letting them do whatever they want without accountability are two different things. Okay, so number one, you should never marry or join with someone that you don't trust. Period. If you can't trust them, you shouldn't be with them. All right, and so, but number two, there always needs to be some accountability. And so, if a wife or a husband is able to just go and do what they want, disappear for hours at a time, unaccountable, what happens is, from my experience, from what I've seen, someone may start out not necessarily intending to engage in extramarital or extracurricular fun bedroom activity, right? But with that opportunity,
or parking lot activity, apparently.
Well,
yeah, parking lot cars. We've seen it all, man. And so. And some of the filthiest parking lots too. It's not even like a somewhat clean or something. But so they if someone, what do they say, an idle mind is the devil's playground.
Mm.
And so that's why we see so many cliche cheating cases. The tennis coach, the golf coach, the trainer, the yoga instructor. On the guy side, the secretary, the co-worker, the assistant. All these things happen so much. Why? Because they're spending time with someone who's, they're spending more waking hours with their coworkers and some of these other people than they are with their spouses. And so, women in particular, and men as well, go into things with knowledge that things could turn into something else, but they do it anyway. But they'll say that, oh no, this guy, he's harmless. He's a friend of mine from the past. Oh, don't worry, she's my secretary. She's my friend. Oh no, this, that, and you hear all types of stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're a spouse and or a significant other and they are going off and doing things with someone of the opposite sex, here's the thing: men don't hang out with women. Most men don't hang out with women unless there's, unless they're incredibly professional. Like, I work with women all the time. I work with female investigators all the time. However, I'm very, very careful how I interact with them because it's a business. It's a business relationship. And so, like, if I have to work on a case with a woman, we're not riding in the same car together.
Yeah.
We'll drive separately and we'll meet where we have to engage in that investigation. And then we'll go, because some of these women are married. And so, again, I'm not a big Bible historian, but what does the Bible say? You must flee the appearance of evil, right?
Yeah.
So fleeing the appearance of evil, what does that mean? That means that you should not be putting yourself in a position where someone can speak evil of you and people will believe it. So guys will go into situations and gals will go into situations knowing that they shouldn't, but they do anyway. But knowing that they can probably get away with it because they have a spouse at home that trusts them. And so, the girls' night out, and I've talked about this on a bunch of different occasions. Girls' night out should not be a thing for a married woman. Girls' trips should not be a thing for a married woman. Okay, how many cases have I seen where girls' night out was used as camouflage for cheating and infidelity? A bunch. How many times have I seen girls' trips? Same thing. Like, we worked on one case where I had to hire other investigators. 4 women went on the trip to South Florida. All of them cheated. Like, literally, it was an exhausting weekend.
And they cover for each other, right? Because I've seen you talk about this before.
Yes. Yeah. And so the most egregious case of that I've seen, and I mean, like, this was, the betrayal, besides the spouse cheating on you. So, married woman, husband thinks she might be stepping out. Okay, we're watching her. And I actually took part of some of this, some of the surveillance in this particular one, just because it was a guy I knew I'd done some work for. Well, he was referred to me by a client of mine, a longtime client of mine. So he said, can you kind of, he wanted me to be more hands-on in this one. And, with a client request, I grant those, obviously, because they're long-term clients and he's a friend. And so his wife, okay, I'll give you the picture, just a brief picture to not bore you, but The wife went to meet the guy's mother and sister. So the mother-in-law and sister-in-law, they were having lunch at a restaurant. The restaurant was in a hotel. Jim Dandy had gotten to the hotel earlier and booked the room. So she stopped in, said hi to the mother-in-law and the sister, went up, had dessert first, then came back down and had a meal with the mother-in-law and the sister-in-law. The mother-in-law and sister-in-law were facilitating the cheating of the wife. And that's happened more than once. And so,
and the mother-in-law, it just blows you away to think about that. It's her son, right? Like,
yeah.
why? Yeah.
Yes. And so, and so I didn't investigate further, but usually when I see that, that indicates that the other women are also engaged in some sort of extracurricular activity, and they're all covering for each other. So the intricacy that we've seen with some of these cheating clubs or whatever. And so here's the thing: men and women cheat. Now I know I post stories mostly about women cheating, but the reason I post stories mostly about women cheating, women are ingenious when it comes to covering their trip. Guys are literally like, you throw a piece of meat on the floor in a lion's cage and they just jump at it. And just YOLO. And they just go with reckless abandon. There's very little planning. And they do not cover their tracks very well at all. Like literally, like they're shockingly easy to catch in most instances. Women, on the other hand, are much, much more difficult. And so paint another picture for you. Girls' night out. Women go out together. They meet at a bar or a club or wherever they're going. They take a bunch of pictures, selfies. We've got video of this. Guys inside the club. Pictures, selfies. One woman will leave, not get in her car, get in the car with an unknown male, unsub, and drive back to his place, do whatever they're doing. Then he'll drop her back off. Her friends are posting pictures regularly. She's posting some of those pictures. And so those pictures are supposedly evidence that she was with her friends all night. She wasn't with her friends all night. She shot off for about an hour and then came back and then finished the night hanging out with her friends. That happens a lot.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, right. You're like, men are stupid. I mean, I wouldn't even that wouldn't even occur to me. It's like the women are, yeah. It's like, I got to build the timeline. It looks like I was here when I was here, but your friends are helping you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it happens. Look, if this happened once, I wouldn't post, stories about it, but it's happened several times. The girls' trips, there's less covering and more just kind of this mad dash to see how much they can accomplish in that period of time. And so, guys have to start being a little bit more, guys and gals. Women are usually pretty good about knowing when their guys are cheating. Guys are sometimes clueless until a woman really slips up badly, and so, but women are usually more intuitive, about when or if their significant other is messing around them. And so with the pictures, the videos, social media, everything else that goes on, it creates the perfect storm for covering for, things that might be, not suspicious, but, outside their marriage. So, what I try to do is, again, I try to approach everything with a blank slate. Guys will tell me what they think their spouse is doing, and I'll take that into account. But I also know that if I just focus on what they think, I could be missing the bigger picture. And so, and we've gotten to see some really just crazy things. Like I told one story about a lone bull servicing the entire herd, and so these women were, well-to-do women, society page people, country clubs, private clubs, that sort of thing, gated communities. That's that crowd. There was one guy who was married who was having affairs with several different married women, all from the same social group. And they all knew they were all messing with the same guy. Now, the obvious question would be like, what did this guy look like? Think Thor, like Liam Hemsworth, but better looking and more jacked.
Okay.
And like 6'7", like the dude looked like a statue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so all these women were messing with the same guy.
All knowingly? Like,
yes.
yeah,
They were all friends.
yeah.
They were all friends. They knew what they were doing, and so the only person that didn't know about it was his wife. And so, when you hear stories about how women will share that top tier guy, I've seen that a bunch of times. It happens a lot, and so, but obviously, you can't be you're not gonna. That's not gonna happen with the run of the mill everyday guy.
Sure.
This guy is obviously, just from the physicality standpoint, he was, obviously in the upper 1% of physical stature, muscularity, looks, all these different things. Plus, the guy was rich.
Yeah.
On top of that, and so, but on the flip side, I've seen women cheat on guys that were what you would call Nephilim. So this guy, 6'9", athlete, and his wife cheated on him with a guy that was shaped like a plumber.
What's the rhyme or reason? Yeah.
And so, when guys focus on, like, I know a guy now, he's so insecure about his height. And I'd like to tell people, don't be insecure about you, but I'm 6'1". So how do I tell a guy who's insecure about his height and he's 5'5"? But what I did was I gave him an example. I've got a buddy, known him for years. This guy is red hair, freckled, balding, 5'7", and women love this guy. The reason he does so well with women is the guy has the most confidence of anybody I've ever met in my entire life. And so his height is not holding him back. It's not a detriment for him.
Yeah. It kind of, listening to you say this, it's kind of triggering, reminding me, like, I see some of the kind of black pilled, more like incel view a lot, is like the only thing that matters is looks. And that's what they'll say. I see that a lot, but like what you're saying, like, really flies in the face of that. It's not.
Well, I'm a really good example of it. Look, I'm not a pretty man. I'm not a beautiful dude. Now, okay, I work out. I stay in shape. I guess I'm taller than average at 6'1", I guess, but I don't have much game at all, and I don't have a problem meeting women. Like, it's actually easy. And what I try to tell guys is, like, you guys act like women are these magical creatures that you have to, like a Rubik's cube, like everything has to be perfect for you to solve the puzzle. It's not that difficult. I find that women, for me anyway, from my experience, my own personal experience, they respond to honesty, honest intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll literally just tell them, I'll meet a woman and say, look, you know what? If we like each other, maybe we'll hang out. If not, we'll go our separate ways. Obviously there's more to it. I have a whole protocol. You guys.
Yeah. I think this is a really good
like
segue actually into something I wanted to ask you about, which is, I saw you make a post a while back about a form that you have
Yes.
the women that you're dating sign.
Yep.
And maybe I had a misunderstanding, and this is what I'm hoping to understand, but it sounded to me like you have literally like explicit sexual acts on this form. And like this, like she says, I agree to this, I agree to this, I agree to this, which I understand on one level. Anyway, so let me just stop there and ask, like, is that true? I mean, is that
100% accurate? Yes, I do. And so my typical protocol is I'll meet a couple. So when I meet women, and I do this for a very specific reason. Some of the criminal defense cases I've worked on 18 grape cases. I don't know if I want to put that word on your social media, the real word, just because social media is not very friendly towards it. But you don't understand what I'm talking about.
I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, and I do that out of respect for you guys and your show. And so all 18 of them were false charges. All 18.
Wow.
And so for me, from an investigative standpoint, and I see these things, and my son uses the same protocol. I've drilled that into his head for years, actually. So the first 2 times I meet a woman, we're not meeting anywhere where there's any alcohol. We'll meet for coffee twice, at least twice. And what I'll ask them is, look, you know what? Do you foresee this becoming physical at some point in the future? And if they say yes, I'll have an envelope in my pocket with the sexual activity consent form. Like, look, when you have time, please review this, fill it out, and then scan it, and send it back to me. Or scan it and get it. Scan it or copy it and give it back to you. And they'll look at it and they'll be like, "Are you serious?" Yes. But here's the thing. And again, we talk about being honest about my intention, right? What I'm doing is I'm number one, I'm showing them that consent, stated and confirmed consent, is I'm taking responsibility for that, but I'm making her a partner in that as well too. And so, that way nobody later on, because okay, look, like years ago, you'd meet somebody, go out, go back to their place, go back to your place. One thing would lead to another. No one ever said, "Hey, is it okay if I touch a buttock?" Right?
Right.
Just to give you an example, or put my hand on your knee or whatever. If you don't do it now, right? Retroactively, you could be looking at someone saying, "Hey, you know what? He never asked me. I didn't feel like I could say no. I didn't feel like I could say stop." How many times have we heard this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it
And
that explicit? You put like, I'm gonna touch your knee, we're gonna hold
well,
hands,
no, there's
brush your hair from your knee.
there's very specific fun bedroom activities listed.
Okay. But not like
Yeah.
casual
Wait,
touch.
which I know eating the I don't know what Russ' name for it is, probably not on that list, but we'll talk about that too.
Sure. Yeah, and so look, I make sure that they understand, like, look, this is part of just my process. And my process is designed to make sure everybody, that no one feels that they've been left out of the decision making process.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm just kind of having this vision in my head of this whole, like, like you just meet a chick, right? And like, you're texting or whatever, and you're like, oh, when I get you alone, like, here's all the things I'm going to do to you. And she's like, oh, she's eating that up. And then, here comes Russ, and he's like, no, I'm serious. Here's the form, actually. Yeah.
So like this idea of a prenup before marriage is almost a little bit icky in some discussions, right? Like you're making this agreement. I can just imagine this is kind of like one step. It's along those lines, but not even at a commitment level. Do you have anybody that'd be like, no, you're crazy, dude. Like, I'm walking. Or do they like it?
I've only had one woman not want to sign it because she thought it wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously that was the last time I met with her. And so what I'll do is I'll take those forms, and literally my attorney has them on file. I'll scan them and email them to my
So if anybody wants to understand your sex life, they go talk to your attorney. Good thing you have that attorney-client privilege.
Thankfully, he's my attorney, and he's bound under attorney-client privilege and secrecy, so he can't talk. But I do that just okay. My view or my approach might be a little extreme to some, but the reason I do that is because I've seen so many cases.
You've seen it, yeah. You know what's going on.
Well, the first one of those cases I worked on, it was an attorney here locally, and he called me into his office and said, "Look, I know you don't," because I told him, I said, "Look, I don't want to deal with those cases. I don't want to work on those as a defense, because I just thought they were, look, if somebody does something like that, I don't want to help them get out of trouble." Yeah. And he said, "Look, I know you don't like these." He said, "Here's what I want you to do." He said, "I'm going to pay you just to look at some of the evidence, gather some of the evidence, and if you don't like what you see, walk away, and I'll pay you anyway." And as I looked into this more and more, I was like, wait a second, this guy didn't do anything. And I presented the evidence to the attorney. He presented it to the state attorney, the prosecutor, and the case got thrown out. And now imagine if he didn't have the wherewithal to hire an attorney, and his attorney didn't have access to a hotshot private investigator like me. That guy would be in prison right now, probably.
Yeah. I won't name specific accounts, but there's accounts I see on X that I follow that are, they kind of consider themselves the pickup artists, the players, right? And it's like I something that you said, you were talking about, you'll go out to coffee or something, like you never go for alcohol, but like I see these guys, and they're like, get her out for drinks immediately, like close immediately, like invite her, and it's like it's just flies in the face of kind of the advice you're giving, and it seems like a very dangerous game to be playing.
I agree 100%, and that's why I specify no alcohol. Just because if someone's looking over a contract, okay, so consent cannot be granted legally if someone is under the influence, whether it's drugs or alcohol, or under duress, right? So that's one of the ways people can nullify prenuptial agreements. Oh, she felt like she was under duress that if she didn't sign it, he would marry her. And so prenuptial agreements have been thrown out. So contracts, you got to think of it this way. If you can't sign a lease, you can't sign you can't go to a closing, or you can't sign for a car note because of your state of mind, whether it's emotional
Mhm.
duress or under the influence of drugs or alcohol, then that contract is null and void. It's thrown out. It's done. And so I do the same thing. That's why I do it in completely non-threatening. And I even specify, look, that you're not obligating yourself to do anything in the future. This is just so I know that you're okay with even broaching the subject in the first place. So again, you take away the duress, but so if you take a woman home after drinks, all right, now you're both drinking. However, if there's an accusation made, um, are the courts going to take into account that the man was under the influence of alcohol as well, or is he going to automatically be seen as the aggressor?
Yeah. Well, and they don't, I mean, after the fact, there's no blood test. How do they know how intoxicated he was? Maybe he had a drink and she had 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And so that's why like the pickup guys, look, I get it. However, it's, if you're relying on someone making a really off the cuff and maybe even rash decision to score, quote unquote, then you're not really a pickup artist. There's not really art to it. You're just taking advantage of someone's state of mind at that particular moment. Like someone like doing a high pressure sales, getting somebody to buy something that they'll think about it later on. Oh man, I wish I didn't buy that damn thing. It's the same thing, but the consequences are much more severe. And so I tell guys this: look, you have to get consent. You have to make sure that she's okay with what you're going to do. You have to. And if you don't, um, I give an example of one time, the last time I ever went shopping with my ex-wife. We went shopping. She wanted to go shopping for a bra, and my son was in a stroller at the time. We were in this store for more than 3 hours. You know how many bras she found?
None.
0.
Yeah.
And so finally, I got fed up and said, "Look, I'm leaving." And she thought I was joking. I took me and the son out to the car. We got in the car, put him in the car seat, and drove home. She called me a little while later. She said, "Did you really leave?" "Yes, I did." "You going to come back and get me?" "No, catch a cab." And that was the last time I went shopping with her. But if you think about that, and then you think about a guy taking a woman for drinks, so she's not in her right state of mind. Number one. Number two, you're doing a high pressure sale thing. That's a perfect breeding ground for the retroactive charge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Assault charge or whatever it is. And so, and again, I know I'm a little bit more cautious about that just because I don't have, I don't have the fear or the mindset that I can't meet another woman if this one doesn't want to with all my criteria. I don't have a problem with that. And so I'm like, look, this is, I think the pickup thing is kind of for amateurs. If I could say it that way, guys who understand how to deal with and meet women, not taking advantage of, drunkenness or something. There's no other way to
Yeah.
put it.
Right.
If you have to take a girl to get drinks, to get her to go home with you, are you really the player you think you are? Probably
Mm.
not. And so, and again, you used to hear about this stuff years ago. Guys were talking about getting women drink and drunk. And I also know some women have the same strategy as well too. But you're asking for trouble, in my opinion. I'm not saying necessarily that those guys have ill intent or through any
Sure.
malfeasance, but if you go look back in time and take a snapshot of that from the standpoint of a victim who's pointing a finger at you and a prosecutor, it's going to make you look bad.
Yeah.
And so I'm just really really careful about it and cautious about it. And again, I don't do anything that anybody's not comfortable with. And so that works for me. And most women, I've only had one say she didn't want to do that. She still wanted to go home with me. She just didn't want to sign that. And I was
Yeah.
like, I said, look, this is just how I do things. So maybe we'll meet another time. I didn't bother after that, but I'm just really careful about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that with everything that you've seen firsthand.
Yeah, and some people will say, look, there's no spontaneity. No, there is none.
Yeah.
Look, at least not initially. Later on, there
Sure.
can be
Sure.
spontaneity once consent and everything else has been established. Then there's some spontaneity, but initially, nope. I'm going to handle this in a business-like manner.
Yeah. 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 Down the road after the form's been signed, you're like, it's on file. We're we're good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You know,
Wow.
and yeah, so I do have actually. There are actually okay. Do you agree to this? Check. Yeah. Do you agree to that? Check, and then initials. Check.
I almost want to see that. I almost want to see this form at some point.
Well,
But
I'm assuming that they could be like, yeah, I'm not down for that, but I'm down for these other 4 things, and so that's a negotiation, right? Like, then you
Yeah,
have to decide, is that something you can live without or
yeah.
let me ask you just a kind of a question that's just now coming to mind. But like, I understand this in a dating situation, but I, I'm, I have seen women, married women, say things like, "My husband raped me," right? Like this happens in marriage at times too, right? And like,
Yes.
what? I mean, should men be having their wives sign these
Yeah.
forms? Like,
When you're married, it should be implied that there is consent. However, here's the thing: the court system tends to, since the hashtag Me Too time, which I mean, I'm not even sure how long. Maybe was it 10 years ago, maybe
yeah,
more,
something like that.
15
Sounds
years ago.
roughly.
They'll tend to listen to what the woman has to say and give her word more weight. And so, married guys, look, if we're honest, most guys get married because of a lot of different reasons, but one of those reasons is that they think they're going to get continued and regular access to fun bedroom activity,
Yep. Sure.
and that is not necessarily the case
Yeah.
in most instances. And so when a woman, and I actually have worked on a case like this, and so the problem with some of these cases, the false accusation cases, is every case I've worked on, there was no evidence that the man actually did anything wrong.
Yeah.
And so now so imagine working on these cases is like being in a hole and trying to dig your way out with a spoon while people are throwing dirt on you with a shovel. If you're married and in that particular case, your chances of getting out of that unscathed are slim and none, and slim just left town. It's incredibly difficult to prove, and so how do you prove you didn't do something?
yeah.
Yeah.
If you're at home with your spouse and she said, "Oh, he did this to me," um, yeah, how do you go about that? Now, there are some times when you can find evidence. We actually have gotten witness testimony from friends of hers. This has actually happened. That said that she was doing this to frame a particular instance so she could divorce him and get
Mm.
custody of the kids and that sort of thing. But if I wasn't able to get her friend to open up and talk about that,
Yeah.
then the guy, this particular guy would have been screwed.
Mm.
And
My
so
my
it's
my
very,
brother went
they,
through a situation, not like in a sexual way, but his wife decided she was going to divorce him, unbeknownst to him, and she had actually been conspiring with her attorney for how to best kind of set him up for failure so that she had good leverage in the divorce. And
yeah,
it was like, I mean, my brother, he went through 2 years of hell. I mean, she had him arrested at one point. She basically had manipulated him into a situation where she was able to get justification for him to get arrested. All those charges were eventually dropped. Like he got out of it. Like his attorney actually did a pretty good job, and was able to kind of to just show some of the conspiring that had happened between her, and that it was kind of it was her attempt to leverage him. So in his case, it had a good outcome, if you want to call it that. But it was literally 2 years of hell of him trying to go through that, and a divorce is playing out. And in the end, his wife got everything she wanted, anyways. It
yeah.
was
Yeah, and so one of the shocking things that I noticed on these cases I've worked on and cases I've reviewed as well too and consulted on is that in none of the cases I've worked on were the false accusers punished in any way, shape, or form.
Same here.
Yeah,
The
that's crazy.
the state attorney would just drop the case, and I would always ask the attorneys, what's going on, and the only recourse men have after this is to sue them civilly. That's it.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to sue someone civilly, and but a lot of guys are just happy to not be in prison. Now, after a false accusation, here's where things happen. So if you don't have an attorney and you can't afford an attorney, you do wind up in prison. That's when things really start to get interesting for you. So if you go to prison with what are called bad charges, anything against women, children, anything of a sexual nature, they're considered bad charges. And so you'll be extorted, you'll be raped, you'll be beaten up, or you'll be deleted, or you'll have to pay money, or you have to check into protective custody, and just a whole bunch of horrible things. But even the guys who have gotten off these charges, if you Google their names and say arrested, it's going to show that they were arrested for sexual battery, which that's the statute for what we talked about before here in the state of Florida. And there's really no way, unless you go after the news outlets, there's really no way to go at to get them to delete that. They'll post your picture in the paper here, but they won't post a retraction once your case has been cleared. And how many people will Google people? Most people Google everybody.
Yeah.
Their name.
Sure.
Like I've had people Google me, and like if you look at my life looks boring. I've never been arrested. I was a police officer. I've got the different business licenses I have. Just because I have to live a somewhat orderly life to deal with some of the stuff I do and the clients I have. If I was a wild man doing a bunch of craziness, who on earth would want me in their house with their family or working on something like that? It doesn't work that way. But now I get to see and witness a lot of really crazy things. But the false accusation, man, the harm it does is I don't even think you can quantify it. The reputation damage, especially nowadays, where reputation because of social media is so important. I've actually had clients hire me to undergo to do reputation control. Matter of fact, they talk about the T app that recently got into the news.
Right. Yeah.
I've been on T since last year. Just because I was doing the I went onto all of the "Are we dating the same guy?" Facebook pages. Well, those have gotten kind of shut down. Not shut down, but there's not much on there because there were several lawsuits, and so it migrated into the T app, and so like I'm actually on T still today. And so when guys want to check their reputations, some of them be like, "Hey, look, I need you to look around and see if because they maybe they're going to go get involved in a business endeavor, and when I'm performing,
they want to know,
Well, one thing I do is I perform due diligence reports as well too. And so if someone's going to do an M&A, a merger and acquisition, or they're going to go into business with someone, or if they're selling a business to an individual, they'll want to make sure this person is, not necessarily above reproach, but that if there is any sort of negative information, it's something they can live with. So, we go back to, being able to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And so I had to look into the T app. Actually, the first thing I did is I experimented and said, "Man, am I in here?" like I'm not. I'm actually like, man, nobody has anything bad. Somebody's got to say something bad to say about me. Am I too much of a nice guy or something? But yeah, shockingly, I'm not in there. But I've actually found friends of mine. And
Wow.
and the way it's set up, you can't really take screenshots. But all you have to do is have another phone.
Right. Always a way around that.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That is. So Russ, I don't want to keep you too much longer here. You've been really gracious and giving us your time. I did want to. I got just a couple more quick things, hopefully.
No. Look. Take your time. I'm actually having fun talking to you guys.
Okay,
so it's
good. All right. Well, good. Then I won't rush too much. But So I wanted to go back. It was kind of a joke, and you had made a post yesterday. Well, maybe it's not a joke, but you made a post yesterday about Jamaicans don't like to dine between the legs, right?
Yeah,
And I told you, I commented and I said, hey, I'm going to ask you about this when we talk
yeah,
today.
yeah.
I
Dining
mean,
at the Y. Yeah.
running it wide, yeah. So
Okay.
so is that is that a legitimate like thing?
That is a legitimate thing. That is a
Okay.
legitimate thing in Jamaican culture. It is verboten.
Both
It
ways?
is no,
Okay. I
no,
didn't think
no.
so, but I just wanted to clear
And
that up.
look, it creates questions because people expect reciprocity sometimes, right? Or most of the time. And I've had women say, "Well, you're not going to do this, no, but you expect me to do that?" Yep. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, I do.
Russ, I was not been together since high school prom, like long time, right? I mean, we've been 30 plus years. We're in our early 50s now, but, um, so I've never really dated, right? Not as an adult, like high school dating, but that's a different thing. So, but I can kind of like understand that from an adult's dating point of view. Like I, I don't know where that chick has been 2 hours before she got to
Yeah,
me or whatever, right?
yeah.
And like I can understand that completely. The marriage side of it, I don't know. Not so much.
Married people, I don't know, but like with Jamaican culture, the reason for that is, Jamaican culture, men are expected to be very manly. They just are. And, like my father, my uncles, like you couldn't show any weakness. It's funny. I was actually in a boxing match. I used to box when I was younger. I'm a martial artist from a long time as well too. But I had a boxing match. My father and my uncles were there, and this guy wound up breaking one of my ribs in the first round. It was a 5 round fight,
Uh,
and I finished the fight. And at the end of it, like I had to get up and answer the bell every single time, and I didn't want to. However, you were going to have to scrape me up off the ground with a spatula before I quit in front of
yeah.
my dad and my uncle. I just couldn't do it. And
Yeah.
so it's considered, if you're a real man, you should be able to satisfy your woman
Gotcha.
without dining at the Y. And so where it started, I have no idea. I actually posted it as a joke, and so many people took it so seriously. But I think a lot of people just don't understand the Jamaican cultural
The
aspect
culture
of
behind
that.
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually messaged someone. I actually posted it as a joke, and people are really getting people are really getting upset about it. But yeah, it's a Jamaican cultural thing, and has it caused some discussions? Yes, it has. However, it's again, that's why you have communication and people talk about things, so I've just I just said, hey, look, this is how I do things, and if if you want or you have to have something different, then maybe I'm the wrong guy.
Yeah.
And again, most Jamaicans, like, look, are there some that do? Yes, there are. Will they ever admit it publicly? Never.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
So
you just can't. You can't say
maybe this is the only your attorney knows the truth on this. So is this on the form or not?
It's got to be on the form. It's on the form, right?
Yeah, right. Look, that form. I remember the first time I started sending these to my attorney. He called me up. It was literally, I met with a woman for coffee. She filled it out right there, gave it to me, and we're supposed to meet another time. And I emailed it and sent it to him. And he calls me up. He goes, "What the hell is this?" What the hell is this? I said, "Dude, I think I told you." He said, "Yeah, you told me." He said, "I thought you were joking." I said, "No, I'm not joking, man." I said, "Look, I'm going to be sending these to you. I need you to just keep them on file." And he's like, "This is." He said, "You're the only person I know that does this." He's he's been a client of mine for the better part of 15 years. So he's more like family than a client,
Hmm.
but I trust him implicitly. And I just do that just because I like to cover my tracks and create I like to document things. I'm an investigator.
I
We
completely
document.
understand it. In the line of work you're in and seeing what you say, I get it 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think putting it in perspective that it's a cultural choice and not a I just don't like to do it thing. I think
Yeah,
you're back on
that
this.
makes it that makes it a little bit easier. Oh yeah, what do you mean back? We're still on that.
I thought we were moving away from it.
Okay,
I was asking
we're
more
moving
before.
on.
Yeah,
We're
but
moving
no,
on. But
that's
that's on the form.
Well, that's I guess that's where I was. You're right. I was asking if it was on
yeah,
the form. Yes,
and I had one woman I deal with different women, and so one of the women in my group or lineup of women, and I do it ethically. They all know that I see other women. I'm not doing the player thing where nobody knows anything, and I also tell them, look, feel free to go out with whoever you want to. You know what I mean? As well, and so I'm not a one way type. I'm like, look, do what you want, and I do that just because it keeps life a little bit less complicated. Um, and and um, and one of them in particular, a woman, really beautiful young woman from Morocco, was like, "But you have such beautiful lips. You'd probably be really good at it." And I just said to her, I said, "That's not going to work. That's not going to work."
She can't compliment you into it.
That's an interesting statement. I have more women, so it's less complicated. I don't understand that.
Well, here's why. And that's a really good question. And so, and I've had to answer this a few different times. So when I first, and again, I told you I'm divorced, but when I first got separated, I actually started dating a woman regularly. And initially it was fun, but then you get into that, okay, what are we? What are we doing? This, that, the other thing. And my whole thing was I gave up everything so I could raise my son. I had full custody of my son.
Mm.
And so for me, and I had to give up a lot, but ultimately it was worth it because I look at my son now; he's absolutely crushing everything he does,
Nice.
and thank God for that, But and so when relationships start to settle down, I guess you could call it. All right, so the initial phase is we're having fun and you know doing whatever like rabbits every single day, multiple times a day or whatever. Typically, guys are actually pretty happy with that, but women are typically not necessarily satisfied. They're happy with it, but they're not satisfied with that, and they want to progress. Unless you're just a dude that they're messing with on the side, in which case, whatever, right? But if you're a guy that they want to spend more and more time with, then things start to get more complicated and next thing I know, she was talking about moving in and all the rest of this stuff, and so I was like, you know what, I need to focus on raising my son, and I need to focus on rebuilding my business because my ex had she was friends with a lot of my clients and their wives, and so when we got separated, she talked her friends into getting their husbands to pull the rug on me, and so I pretty much had to start from back from pretty much nothing. And so, and again, that's okay. Looking back at it, we get along now, but back then it made things really, really difficult for me, as you can imagine. But the complication side of things, and so now for me, my main focus is my business, staying healthy, running my business, but also too, like my place is just me and my son here and I call it my fortress of solitude. I call it Private Eye Russ HQ, and it's peaceful, but it's a bachelor place. And so, like in my living room, I've got a weight bench in my living room. I've got kettlebell.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've got my golf clubs over there. I've got my fencing gear. I fence as well too. I got my fencing gear. Some of the fencing gear hanging out nearby. And so, how many women want to be around, a place, a place like that? Probably not too many. And for me, if I have, like right now, I see 5 different women, and so and I do have, they are numbered. I do have a number 1 through number 5. Number 5 recently moved up to number 3 through hard work and dedication. And she moved up, and so kudos to her. And I told the other ones, I told 4 and 5, look, don't lose heart, just work harder. I told 1 and 2, don't get complacent. Don't get complacent because number 3 is trying to move up. You know what I mean? She's trying to move up, and so you guys got to stay
like
on your
the
toes.
Seinfeld with like the.
Are there benefit levels? Like, is level 1 getting more benefit than?
Yes. Obviously,
Okay.
otherwise there wouldn't be a point. You know. And so,
okay. Personal question: is this like fun bedroom activity benefits, or are there other benefits involved?
there's a lot of other things involved. So I'll give you an example. Number 1, I was going to a dinner It was like a banquet where I was going to be honored, tuxedo, all the rest of that. She's the first person. She's the first one that gets the call.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know,
Mhm.
and then when it comes to fun bedroom activity, they'll get pretty well worked out. That's why I need a different rotation. That there are very few women that are going to be able to deal with my appetite.
This
Day
is
to day.
like textbook the Coolidge effect here we're
The
talking
cool,
about.
yeah, definitely the Coolidge effect.
Yeah, but and so what I find is that if and again, when you're doing that, you can't. I know guys go online, they talk about if you do anything for a woman, you're a simp, and that's just ridiculous. At the end of the day, everybody has to get something out of it,
Yeah.
and so I make sure they're well taken care of with the fun bedroom activity side of things. I also, like, okay, number one, when like we were having the hurricanes, everybody's worried about whatever else. Guess what? Number one gets to stay over at my place during that time.
Yeah.
She gets. That doesn't mean I won't help the others out if they need help, but she got to stay here during that time of when everybody's scared or whatever. This is probably one of the safest places to be, and so when number 5, she moved up because she's the one from Morocco, beautiful and like stunning. You know what I mean? And so she moved up because every time she'd walk in my house, she's looking for something to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if there's a dish in the sink, she's going to do the dishes. If there's dirty clothes, if something needs to be folded, and I don't even ask her to do anything. And she's constantly looking for ways to help me. Now that doesn't mean I don't help her with things either. You know what I mean? Like one of them the other day, she had an issue with a neighbor that was kind of doing the stalking thing and had actually gone into her yard a couple of times. So what I did was, okay. And so this was number 2. And so what I did was I made a call to one of my surveillance guys, and I was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to put any cameras up. We're just going to watch and we're going to see. And then we're going to make a plan of attack. And so he was doing like almost like the peeping Tom thing.
Oh, wow.
And so we got pictures and video of him doing that. And then I surreptitiously entered her home and was in her house. And so I had my guy watching. We have comms and everything else. And so as soon as he goes onto her property, I may have snuck up on him and scared and frightened him and had a talk with him. And after that, he left her alone.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, are there privileges? Yeah, there's privileges for knowing me and hanging out with me. And so when you hear guys talk about how, oh yeah, I got all these girls, I'm do anything for them except, okay, you're lying, or they're either lying or they're paying for it. You know what I mean? Because there's no way anybody's going to put up with that for any length of time.
Yeah.
And so
Not real
and why should they? Why should they?
Yeah.
There has to be something to gain for them. There has to be something in it for them. And if you treat women just like, if you treat them like a jerk, and some people might think I'm a jerk, but I'm honest with every single one of them. I don't lie to anybody about anything. You guys will probably find this interesting. I actually had a very awkward situation. I was hanging out with one of them, and we were having dinner. There's a private club here in Orlando, and we were having dinner. Well, one of my other ladies was having dinner with her family. and I spotted her when I walked in, and I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm just gonna have to deal with it. And so she didn't say anything. She was actually pretty cool about it. And she texted me, while I was having dinner with her. She was like, "Which number is she?" Period. Question mark. LOL. And I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "Oh
Yeah,
my
because
god!"
I guess they know about one another, but they don't know one another.
Exactly.
That's like too many worlds colliding.
Yeah, and so after that, here's what happened. The effect of that, me having dinner with this woman, the effect of that was this one started working harder. You know what I mean? And so this, like the women's natural competitiveness. Women, I think, are more competitive than men are in their own way. And so am I wrong?
No, I mean, especially when it comes to your man.
Yeah, and so and so she was actually pretty cool about it. And the reason she was cool about it is because I didn't lie to them from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think
then
that's fair. I mean, if everybody knows what's happening, like you enter in knowing that you're one of, I don't know, do you tell them it's 5? Is that your cap? Or do you just tell them there's multiples?
you know,
If they know.
at one point I had more than 5, but then it just becomes too much like work.
Yeah, there's only
You know,
7 days in the week, Russ.
you know, I've entertained more than one lady in a day. And it's
Do you
you
ever
know,
bring like 3 and 5 over at the same time, and you guys compete? And let's.
no, well, I've had escapades when I traveled overseas a bunch. But here, you know, my whole thing is this: I have a very very rigorous appetite. I do,
Mm.
and I always have. And so, you know, like when I was married, it was probably difficult on my wife just because you know I would want to go twice a day. You know, and so how many women are going to want to deal with twice a day every day? Probably never. But and to be fair, she knew I had this appetite before we got married,
Yeah.
and she dealt with it until we got married. Then she wanted me to throttle back.
Mm.
You know, which I did, but obviously it was
All
you
right.
know, during that time I actually put on like 15 pounds of muscle during that time, just working out all the time.
Yeah, it is unfair. I mean, we hear men talking about that in marriage, and it's like, yeah, it's like they get married and the wife wants to pull back sex or whatever, and you know, like you said, I mean, if you go in kind of knowing, it is a very unfair thing to do to the husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. I compare it to this, and I made this comparison on X, and I got flamed by so many people because of this, man. So sex before marriage is like Walmart, 24-hour Walmart supercenter. It's
Mm.
open 24 hours a day. You can get pretty much whatever you want, right? After marriage turns into Publix. Can't get as much. The hours have been restricted significantly, but you can still manage to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
After childbirth, it becomes a boutique, appointment only boutique that you can only get a couple of items, and the store will decide when it feels like opening of its own accord. And if you miss that window of opportunity, you got to wait until the store decides to open again at some point in the future.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt
no,
you.
go ahead, please.
I was going to say, I think, you know, and I think people really discount this as like one of the big, I mean, sex is the thing that drives a lot of everything. I mean, you could almost argue sex is what really runs the world in a way, right? And I don't think it's any different in marriages. And if people come to us and they're like, "Hey, you guys seem to have a great marriage, and you've been married for as many years you've been married. Like, what is the thing?" Well, we're like sexual people. Like, I really believe that if you get the sex right, like all the other parts of marriage, like it's not that there aren't challenges, but they're easy to overcome, and it's easy to kind of get through that stuff. Like that's the easy part, right? It's just like, as long as you focus on the sex, and it's just such a shame that so many marriages are missing that.
Yeah, I actually helped save a marriage here locally. And so one of my neighbors was talking about divorcing her husband, and it was at like something everybody's talking. It's like a neighborhood almost barbecue get together. We have those every now and then. And so you know, I'm sitting there talking to a neighbor. She starts talking to the same woman I'm talking to, and you know, she's talking about she wasn't happy and this and that. You know, kind of the usual thing you hear. And then she was, you know, talking about how he wants to have sex all the time. And here's what I told her. I said, look, here's the thing. I said, here's what you have to consider. Instead of, and what she was doing was she was withholding sex to get him to do things. So holding it
Mhm.
hostage to get him to do things. And I said,
Mhm.
you're doing things the exact opposite of what you should be doing. I said,
Yep.
here's what you should be doing instead. I said, if your husband wants you to give him a lap dance in the living room, give him a freaking lap dance in the living room.
Yep.
I said, number one, it'll keep everything fresh and good for both of you. I said, you'll be surprised the benefits you get out of it. I said, but you'll also find that your husband is going to be more willing to do more for you if
Yep.
if he's well sexed up. And I used to try to explain this to my ex, and I was like, you know, I said, you know, sex is very important, you know, to men. Now, some maybe not so much, but to most men, it's extremely important. And again, that's one of the driving factors that many guys get married in the first place. And then when they get married, they find that they're going through. I actually posted this the other day, that you know, you'll find that the time when you get the least amount, for not everybody but a lot of guys, is when they get married. And so she took my advice, and she was like, you know what, you were absolutely right. She goes, he's changed. I said, here's why. I said, when a woman withholds sex, here's what happens to a guy. I said, pressure starts to build up. And then he starts noticing every set of perky boobs and
Mhm.
perfect buttocks, nice legs, pouty lips, beautiful hair, pretty feet. He notices at the gas station, the women at his office. He starts noticing it more and more and more because you're not giving him what he wants. You can't let your husband walk around with a full sack,
Yep.
and you can't do it with any regularity and expect there not to be some sort of negative. I'm not saying I'm not saying that's justification for cheating. If you're married, you know be loyal and do what you're supposed to do. Be honest and be up and above board. But does that mean that guys won't? Yeah, a lot. Some of them will, but also too, a lot of guys will grow resentful, and there'll be a lot of resent, and that'll be just buried beneath the surface, and it'll affect and hurt your relationship overall, just because you want to, what I call weaponized vagina. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if you're withholding it from them, I'm like, why are you withholding it? Would you collecting interest on it or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so she actually changed things up, and she said, that actually probably saved my marriage. Yeah, it probably did. I said, why are you holding back? What for? And
Yeah.
so, they went down a whole different, a big transformation. So actually, she credited me with saving her marriage.
There's a book I read a while back, and the title is escaping me at the moment, but it described kind of like a man's sexual is kind of like a rubber band. And it's like it starts stretching tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And the tighter that rubber band gets, like the more intense the need to release that pressure is.
Yeah,
And which is kind of like what you're describing. It's like you start noticing more of this, more of that. And it's like, man, somehow I got to release the pressure in this thing. And then once you release it, great, boom, right? You're right back. But then it starts stretching again. And depending on the man, kind of depends on how quickly this thing is stretching and contracting, right? But
yeah, yeah. And again, I don't know if many women don't understand this. And because I've heard so many, social media, so many posts, but also too, I've talked to many women who have the same thing. Why do men want to have sex? I remember talking to a woman, she's in her 40s, and she was like, my husband wants to have sex. I said, okay, so it took you to your 40s to realize that guys want to have sex. I said, you're joking, right? I said, "Guy, of course they do." I said, most of what men do is driven
yeah,
by if we break things down to the lowest common denominator. So many of our motivations are driven towards that,
yeah,
towards that particular thing. And so, okay, I stay in shape for a couple of reasons. Number one, I stay in shape because if I have to hurt you or save you, I want to be able to do so.
yep,
And I got to stay physically fit. Number two, I stay physically fit because I don't want to look like a slob. And then, but also number three, chicks don't dig fat guys.
yeah,
At least most don't. And so I look at so many different motivations that guys. How many guys buy nice cars because of women? How many guys wear nice
mhm,
clothes because of women?
yep,
How many guys do so many different things because of women? And women meaning access to sex, fun bedroom activity with women. And so, but there are a lot of women who are either clueless or they're acting like they're clueless about men's not just desire but need. It's a
yeah,
biological imperative. It was
yeah,
it was built into us for a reason, to perpetuate the species. And so, if you're married and your wife is withholding that from you, you're going to resent her. You're going to resent the fact that you're married to a person that's doing that, and in some ways, someone will use it like a cudgel to beat you over the head with. So I remember, like,
mhm,
my ex started doing that, but then after a while, here's what happens. After a while, if you withhold it for a certain amount of time and you keep doing it, after a while, the husband says, "Okay, you know what? I don't want it anymore." You know what I mean? And then you run into that danger, and then it's no longer a weapon that you can use. And then,
yep,
this guy married you. Sure, he loves you, but sex was sex was part of it, and now he's not even getting that.
Yeah.
So and I think a lot of women should probably examine some of the motives behind that. Now, does it happen with men? Rarely. Does it? Yes, it does. But usually, if it does, there's usually some sort of underlying medical issue
Yeah.
with
Or get your
guys.
T levels checked or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually recommended that to friends of mine. To go check their, and some guys are embarrassed about it or whatever. And I'm like, look, man, modern science is what it is. If it can help you, it can help save your life. For so many things. Like one buddy of mine, retired Green Beret. He was a breacher, and so they've done a lot of studies on the effect that those concussive waves have had. And what they've done is they mess up guys' hormones and their hormonal balance. And this guy went from being a really tough guy to just being a whiny, man. And so finally, I just told him to do it. I said, I jokingly said, dude, you need to get your T levels checked, man. You're probably low T, man. Cause he's like crying about stuff. And like this guy was like a really, really tough guy. And so, and he did 11 tours in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He actually, you're not supposed to go that much. He actually did 11.
Yeah.
And so he actually went to some program, a different state, and they checked his T levels. They're like, yeah, his T levels were like shockingly low,
Wow.
like down to like below 250 or something like that. It's supposed to be much higher.
Yeah, much higher.
And so and that probably saved his life. That probably saved his life, but guys rarely want to withhold that from their spouse. And so and women, I understand it gives them leverage, but if you overplay that hand, it's so destructive to relationships in a very, very significant way.
I think a common theme I'm kind of hearing, just not that we live parallel lives by any means. We don't. I mean, you have a different lifestyle than we do.
Do you have 4 other women?
3.
3?
4,
okay.
Yeah. But,
just kidding.
No, don't have Russ investigate me or anything. But I think honesty, right? And I think that's kind of like the root of like, if we could just get more of that right and just talk about, like, I like to say, like, let's talk about what is, not what we wish was, right? Because that is really like a huge key. And I don't, I mean, I'll say it right here where they were sitting right next to me. I mean, in our marriage, again, I'd said like we have a very sexual marriage. I don't have any issue saying to her, hey, the reason you're here is because I enjoy having sex with you, and sex is very, very important to our marriage. And, and I need you kind of looking and behaving in a certain way that's attractive to me, because that is what's the motivation for me to be in this marriage. Right.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like, I know that would, like, there's other married women out here. They're probably like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that to your wife. But hey, you know what? We've been here as long as we've been here because we're honest. And it's the same thing as kind of what you're saying in your relationships. I mean, I know you're not currently married, but the relationships you're having with these other women, honesty, right? And it just, it means so much.
I mean, when Rob agreed to marry me, he agreed from my point of view to only have sex with me ever again. Yeah. So like, if that's what I'm asking of him, how can then I not give it to him?
Yeah. But the opposite happens a lot.
Yeah, that just blows my mind.
And I agree with you about the honesty part. Like, people will say, well, why would women agree to that? You'd be surprised if you're honest with people, like really just honest with people. Like, I've met women. This is before I did the whole sexual activity consent form and all the rest of that stuff. Literally, one of my best pickup lines for a woman, she was like, I was like, so what are you going to do the rest of the night? She said, I'm going to do whatever you're going to do. I said, well, I'm going to go home and get naked. And she was like, okay. And I said, look, we'll go home. We'll engage in fun bedroom activity. If we like it, we'll do it again. If not, you can go home. But the honesty behind it is, I think a lot of guys would be surprised that women actually will accept an honest answer and not necessarily outwardly, just outright reject what you have. Because if you try to do that by hook or by crook, that's when people have bad feelings. They have regrets, and that could lead to negative things as well too in the future. And my whole thing is, one of my things I always hammer on this is people have the right to make an informed decision. And so if I meet a woman and I'll say, look, this is mostly going to be about fun bedroom activity. If you're cool with that, that's fine. You know what I mean? If you're not, then look, I understand. And so then we part ways as friends. But yeah, honesty has to be up there. But I think there are a lot of guys that are just they've had drilled into their head that they think women aren't going to accept that, they won't accept them, so they've got to put up a front or some sort of facade or a mirage in order to pretty much trick women into being with them. And I think if you're just yourself and be who you are, you're going to attract the person that's attracted to you. And so I try to tell guys, like I was out the other day with one of my lady friends, and a buddy of mine was like, dude, your girl is really pretty. And I said, what, for me? He's like, yes. I said, well, I said, I get sometimes a little bit of grief from some of the older women in my neighborhood. Like one of them confronted me one day. She was like, well, how old was that young lady that picked you up? I said, well, which one? I said, which one? And she was like, the blonde with the convertible. I said, oh, I was like, oh, she just turned 20. and she was like, why can't you find a woman your own age? I said, I can. I said, but, but what's, why do you care? You know what I mean? Like one way or the other. I'm not doing anything bad to anyone. If you talk to her, she'll tell you that like you talk to any of them, they have fun hanging out with me because I make sure everything's fun. I make sure everything's cool.
Girls just want to have fun, right? Isn't that what is there some truth in that?
Yeah. Look, if they have fun dealing with you and hanging out with you, if they know that when they hang out with you, they're going to have, number one, I don't treat women like a jerk off. I'm not a jerk. Why? Why be negative or nasty or mean to people? You know what I mean? When I talk about, and I've explained this to my son from early age. Women's private lady parts are like a flower. You know what I mean? Like a male's private parts can work if they're angry, if they're sad, if they're depressed. Women's lady parts work best when they're happy and turned on.
Okay.
And so if you want to get the best out of your interaction with her private lady parts, there are certain behaviors you have to engage in. And that just makes things work a whole bunch better. And guess what? They're going to want to engage with you with that fun bedroom activity more and more and more because of that. Yeah. And so, I'll hang out with them. We'll play mini golf. We'll go. I love going to the go-kart thing. I actually have a video of me doing performing a pit maneuver on this brunette I go out with sometimes. She kept cutting me off. I was trying to pass her. I gave her a couple of chances, and so I was like, okay. So I spun her out. I'm actually posted at one point. But when they hang out with me, they're having fun. Like I took one followed me or met me at my fencing school one day, and got to watch me vanquish people and engage in one-on-one. Like me and this one dude, we always compete. Really, he's a really good fencer. He's actually better than me, which I like. That's why I like fencing with him. But we go back and forth, man. Like there's no give, there's no nothing. It's not a fun competition, but I still enjoy it. And she actually loved it. She actually said that, that actually turned her on watching me compete and go back and forth like that. Sure. I've had women watch me because I also teach combatives. I'm also a combatives teacher as well too. And some of them would watch me teach combatives classes, and they said that turned them on. And so, if you listen to some of these pickup artist guys, yes, you can be successful, but the ratio of success with these guys is like what, 1 out of 100. And they're walking up to women almost like telemarketers, giving them rebuttals and over and over again. It's ridiculous. And it's not. I think a lot of guys see that because they don't understand how to interact with women in the real world, and so they see some guy that looks like he knows what he's talking about, and they're literally giving like the high pressure. It's literally high pressure sales theory. Now, so when I was a broker, when I was a stockbroker, I didn't do the high pressure sales things because you're dealing with very sophisticated investors, and so you're not going to do the high pressure sales with them. And so what I would do is I would sell the risk. Okay, here's the worst case scenario, but I will also do more of a consultative, thing. And I don't have a problem meeting women. I'm not a pickup artist. And I think the pickup artist thing is very, very, like you brought up, very extremely risky from so many different, so many different angles. It's incredibly risky, but also too, you're pushing someone to something that they may very well likely regret later on. And those regrets can turn into a retroactive
A legal
uh,
problem.
accusation. Yes,
Yeah.
and that has happened. I've seen some of them from that standpoint, but like when I'm hanging out with women, I'm not hanging out with them because I want to step on their necks or anything like that. I'm hanging out with them because the work I do is I have a lot of responsibility with the work I do. A lot of pressure, a lot of people expecting things from me, and usually they come to me when they have a problem, and usually that problem is very, very serious. And so I have to deal with those problems and I have to deal with the people who are performing those different things. So when I'm hanging out with a woman, I'm hanging out because I want to actually have fun and relax. That's why I want to avoid the complication of a relationship, because things just turn into something that isn't necessarily fun. It almost becomes work in some instances. And
Sure.
so with the women I deal with, they understand, look, if I'm hanging out with them, I'm hanging out with them because I actually want to have fun. Or I'm perfectly fine literally chilling out by myself with my dogs, or going for a hike. I hunt with a bow. I'll go bow hunting, or, I'll do, different things that just, that I do to relax. And, but if I'm hanging out with them, I'm hanging out with them because we're going to have fun. And they don't have a problem with it. They don't have a problem with the matter of fact. When that one saw me out with the other one, when I actually did meet her again, she was like, "I didn't know you liked brunettes," because she's blonde. And I was like, I try to keep one of each around.
Yeah. Just tell her it's novelty, right? Men like
Yeah.
novelty. Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, Russ, I thank you so much for joining. I really genuinely enjoyed this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You know what?
And,
Thank you both so much for having me on. It was my pleasure. I try to engage in social media stuff more, but I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not a social media guy. I'm a business guy that
yeah.
that does social media, and so I'm trying to dedicate more time to making more videos and things like that.
I hope you do, because I think there's a lot of just knowledge you possess that is really good for men to know, right? Young and old men, right?
Yeah, I've got a few. I've got a bunch of videos in the bank. I've put on a Dropbox file that I've done over time, and I'm starting to release more and more of them. And there may be like a Private Eye Russ podcast with true private eye stories.
Oh,
Oh
nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I draw from not just the private eye side of things, but also to I served in war zones, in the military. I also worked as a civilian military contractor. I was a bodyguard out in Los Angeles and in Hollywood for a while, and then the PI stuff here. So I've got a ton of and I've also traveled a bunch of different places, man. I actually made a video called the Passport Bro Survival Guide, Colombia edition, because I've talked to so many guys that they've gotten drugged in Colombia and robbed and all these things, and so so for guys to survive, some of these survival videos, I actually interviewed a couple of guys that gave me some really good tips to help them with that. I've been to all over Eastern Europe, Western Europe,
You
Australia, New
definitely
Zealand.
need a podcast, Russ. You definitely do.
Yeah, like I said, I've got a bunch, and I keep making more all the time. It's just like I kind of saved some of the reaction videos and some of the news analysis videos. Like I put one out the other day, yesterday, I think, about the young lady who got 25 years in prison in Dubai,
Oh
because she
yeah.
was a British
Yeah.
lady, law
Yes, I
student.
saw that.
Look, man, Middle Eastern jails, and I used to speak fluent Arabic.
Oh,
I had an apartment in the Middle East. Sometimes I'd wear a tobe and distache. I had a bunch of friends. Still have a bunch of friends in the Middle East, and the whole legal system over there. I've actually been to. My unit commander made us go to a beheading, a hanging, and a stoning.
oh.
they don't play over there when it comes to drugs or other crimes. Like I've been to Cuba. Like if you get caught with cocaine in Cuba, it's 25 years in jail. You get caught with marijuana, it's 10 years in jail. And you don't want to go to a Cuban prison. And so, Americans and Westerners, they go to these places. So I talked about some of this, but I'll talk more about some of these things in some of the other videos. But people think, somewhat arrogantly, that the laws that you're accustomed to and the rights and the freedoms that you have, say here in the United States of America or other parts of the world, Western world, apply when you go to these other places. No, not at all. There's a hierarchy. There's civil law. There's Quranic law, which supersedes it. But even above that is tribal law, especially when you're talking about Middle Eastern countries. And if you violate some of these laws, the only penalty for some of these punishments is death. And so she's a really beautiful young lady. Like she's beautiful. Like she's a stunning looking young lady from her pictures. She's going to be in one of the worst prisons on the planet for 25 years.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, and so I made that, and I'll release another video today. You guys might like it. It's about a person who got caught cheating.
Are you doing this on YouTube or X? Where do you release?
YouTube.
Okay, because I haven't. You're saying these, but I haven't seen them. But I only follow you on X. So I need to go find your YouTube channel. Sounds like
it's just Private Eye Russ on YouTube, and I've got a few videos I've put out. Some of the early ones were shockingly bad. I might actually make them private. I've gotten better at making videos and some of the video production. My son helps me out with a lot of that stuff, and thumbnails. I guess that's a big thing.
Yeah. You gotta have the clickbaity thumbnail will help.
Yeah, and I feel bad about the clickbait because I'm like, I don't want to clickbait anybody, But yeah, I'll put one out again today. But and so again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the things you guys were. You guys probably made me look good because you guys were such great hosts. So I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate you.
It was easy.
We'll have to have you back on again some other time. So. Yeah. I guess just in closing, so how do people find you, Russ? You've got your X account, you've got your YouTube account. Is it all just Private Eye Russ?
Yeah, it's all Private Eye Russ. Even my email address is russ@privateeyeruss.com. A website is coming soon, and then I'll be making announcements. The first book that's going to come out is in the ebook about teaching men how to literally give them a system of how to vet women.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to read that and make sure I made a good choice here. I don't know. We'll see. I'm waiting for it to come out.
You know what? For what it sounds like, you already had the cheat code, my friend.
Yeah. Honesty. I mean, that's what I'm going with.
Yeah.
Right? But cool. Well, Russ, thank you again so much for your time, and we'll do it again sometime. We'll see ya.
Thank you guys so much.